The front door of the Caldwell estate swung open with a slow, deliberate motion, the kind that told you this wasn't just any ordinary visit. Marcus Caldwell, the heir to a billion-dollar empire, stepped inside first, his hand gently resting at the small of the young woman's back. She followed, her every step measured. Her soft pink floral dress moved with her, catching the warm light that spilled across the marble floor. Her name was Ava. She wasn't nervous, but she wasn't naive either. Every detail of this house screamed power, from the sweeping staircase to the art that looked like it belonged in a museum. The air inside was warm, but the welcome was not. At the far end of the grand hallway, they waited. William Caldwell, tall and silver-haired, stood with the posture of a man used to boardrooms and winning negotiations. Beside him, Eleanor Caldwell, the mother, impeccable in a black dress, pearls resting on her collarbone, her beauty as sharp as her gaze. Marcus smiled. "Mom, Dad, this is Ava." The father's expression shifted only slightly, a polite nod that didn't quite reach his eyes. The mother stayed silent. Her lips curved into what might have passed for a smile, if not for the way her eyes lingered on Ava, as though she were a puzzle piece that didn't belong in the box. Ava stepped forward, extending her hand. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Caldwell." Eleanor took the hand, her fingers cool against Ava's warmth. "Welcome, dear. Marcus has told us about you." Her voice was smooth, but the pause before told us felt deliberate. The father gestured toward the living room. "Why don't we sit? I'm sure you had a long drive." They moved together into a space that looked more like a luxury hotel lounge than a family room. High ceilings, soft golden lighting, and the faint scent of fresh flowers. Ava took the edge of the sofa, Marcus beside her, while Eleanor and William sat opposite, their posture perfect, their eyes sharp. Small talk began. Where she grew up, what she studied, her work. Ava answered with poise, never flinching, but she could feel the undercurrent, the quiet evaluation happening with every word. And then it happened. Eleanor's eyes drifted from Ava's face down to her neck. Her gaze froze. Around Ava's neck hung a delicate gold chain, holding a small pendant, an oval locket with the faintest engraving on its surface. The mother's expression didn't change, but her eyes said something else entirely. Something cold, something knowing. Ava, noticing the stare, smiled politely and touched the locket. "It was my mother's," she said softly. "She gave it to me before she passed." Eleanor's lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but instead she reached for her wine glass. "That's quite a piece of jewelry," she murmured. The father glanced at her, a question flickering in his eyes. Marcus, oblivious, kept talking about their trip, but Eleanor didn't hear him. She was still looking at the necklace, and in that moment something had shifted. Something in her memory had been pulled to the surface, and she did not like what she saw. The dining room of the Caldwell estate was the kind of place where every meal felt like an event. A long polished mahogany table ran the length of the room, lit by a chandelier that cast a soft golden glow. The silverware gleamed. The napkins were folded with military precision. Ava sat at one side, Marcus beside her. At the other end, Eleanor and William, their faces set in the kind of polite stillness that said more than words ever could. The food looked perfect: roasted lamb, glazed carrots, fine wine. But Ava could taste the unspoken tension more than the meal. Eleanor lifted her glass, eyes fixed on Ava. "So, Ava, Marcus tells us you studied architecture." "Yes, ma'am," Ava replied, her voice calm. "I'm working with a small firm in the city right now." "That must be challenging," Eleanor said, her tone walking the thin line between curiosity and skepticism. "Architecture isn't exactly an easy field to break into." Ava smiled faintly. "It has its challenges, but I've always believed in building things that last." William cut into his lamb, speaking for the first time in minutes. "And where do you see yourself in 5 years?" A simple enough question, except for the way he said it. The pause before 5 years felt weighted, almost as though he was really asking. "And where do you see yourself in this family?" Marcus, sensing the subtle interrogation, reached for Ava's hand under the table. "She's incredibly talented," he said firmly. "Her firm already trusts her with major projects." Eleanor's gaze fell, once again, to the locket around Ava's neck. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass, the crystal catching the chandelier's light. "It's a lovely necklace," she said finally. "Thank you," Ava replied, touching it instinctively. "My mother's." "I don't take it off." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "I imagine not." Silence settled over the table. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, it was loaded. Marcus tried to shift the mood. "You should see some of Ava's designs, Mom." But Eleanor set down her fork and interrupted, her smile perfectly polite. "If you'll excuse me for just a moment." She rose from the table, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor as she left the room. Marcus looked at his father, who was suddenly very interested in his plate. Ava glanced toward the doorway, her brow furrowing. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew it had something to do with that necklace. "Before I tell you what Eleanor did next, I have to ask, where are you watching from right now?" The comments are always full of surprises, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. And while you're down there, let me know. If you were in Ava's position at that table, would you have stayed calm or called it out right then and there? Back upstairs, Eleanor stood in her bedroom. The door was closed. Her hand was inside the top drawer of her dresser, pulling out an old photograph. In the picture, younger Eleanor, standing beside another woman. Both were smiling, and around that woman's neck, the exact same locket Ava was wearing downstairs. Eleanor's heart thudded in her chest. She traced the image with her finger, her jaw tightening. Whatever Ava thought that necklace meant, Eleanor knew a different story. Eleanor stayed frozen, staring at the photograph like it had the power to rewind time. In it, the young woman beside her wasn't just some friend. She was Clara, her sister. The sister she hadn't spoken to in over 25 years. The sister she'd sworn never to see again. The necklace in the picture was identical. Same delicate chain. Same faint engraving. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a family heirloom, passed down from their grandmother. And yet, Eleanor had been certain it was gone forever. Her hands trembled. She closed the drawer quickly, shoving the photo back inside, as if hiding it could erase the truth. Downstairs, the air felt heavier without Eleanor in the room. Marcus tried to keep the conversation alive. "So, Dad, are you still working on that charity project?" William looked up slowly, eyes flicking toward Ava before answering. "It's ongoing." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Ava, do you know much about your mother's side of the family?" Ava blinked at the question. "Not really. My mom didn't talk about them much. She passed when I was 8. William nodded slowly, his gaze unreadable. "And your father?" "He left before I was born." The faintest smirk tugged at William's lips. It was the kind of that carried judgment without a single word of explanation. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Dad." But footsteps approached. Eleanor re-entered the room, her face perfectly composed, as though nothing unusual had happened. "I apologize for the interruption," she said, sliding gracefully back into her seat. Her eyes met Ava's for the briefest moment, and in that moment there was something different, something sharper. Marcus exhaled. "Everything okay, Mom?" "Of course, darling," she said smoothly. "Just remember something I needed to check on." The meal continued, but Eleanor hardly ate. She watched Ava, every word, every movement, like a chess player studying an opponent's strategy. After dinner, Marcus suggested showing Ava the gardens. They excused themselves, leaving Eleanor and William alone at the table. William spoke first. "That necklace, I saw it," Eleanor interrupted. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "It's Clara's." William frowned. "That's impossible." Eleanor shook her head slowly. "I know what I saw, and if it's hers, that girl downstairs is not who she says she is." Outside in the gardens, Ava and Marcus walked along the winding stone path, lit by small lanterns. Ava's fingers brushed her locket. "Your mom keeps looking at my necklace," she said quietly. "It's making me a little uncomfortable." Marcus squeezed her hand. "She's just particular about things. Don't read into it." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. His mother was more than just particular. When she fixated on something, it was for a reason. Back inside, Eleanor stood at the window, watching them from the shadows. She didn't just see Ava. She saw Clara. She saw 25 years of anger, betrayal, and unanswered questions. And she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let the night end without finding out exactly who this girl really was. Night had settled over the Caldwell estate like a heavy velvet curtain. The guests had left hours ago, but the air inside the mansion still felt electric, charged with something unseen. Ava sat with Marcus in the sitting room, the soft hum of jazz playing from the grand piano speakers. They spoke quietly, but every time she glanced toward the hallway, she caught the faintest flicker of movement. Eleanor was watching. She didn't hover, she didn't need to. She had perfected the art of being present without being seen. But Marcus knew his mother's patterns, and Ava could feel the eyes on her even when Eleanor wasn't in sight. Finally, Marcus stood. "I'm going to get us some tea," he said, giving Ava's shoulder a squeeze. He stepped into the kitchen and found his mother already there. She stood at the counter, her phone in hand, speaking in a hushed tone. "Yes, tonight. No, I don't care how late it is. I want answers." She hung up before Marcus could make sense of it. "Who was that?" he asked. Eleanor didn't flinch. "An old friend." Her tone was light, but her eyes were ice. "Mom, if you've got a problem with Ava..." "It's not Ava I have a problem with," she cut in sharply. "It's that necklace, and the woman who used to wear it." Marcus blinked. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor's lips pressed together. "That necklace belonged to someone I swore I would never see again. And if Ava is wearing it, then there's a truth she's not telling you." Marcus's voice hardened. "Ava doesn't lie to me." Eleanor didn't respond. She simply brushed past him, heading toward the front door, as if she had somewhere urgent to be. This is the part of the story where everything you think you know starts to unravel. If you've been following along this far, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what Eleanor is about to discover is the kind of truth that can tear a family apart. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you found out your partner was connected to a family secret no one was supposed to uncover? 2 hours later, the sound of tires on gravel broke the stillness of the night. Marcus and Ava, sitting together in the living room, turned toward the window. A black sedan rolled to a stop. A tall man stepped out, his face shadowed under the porch light. Eleanor opened the door before he even knocked. The man stepped inside without a greeting, his eyes going immediately to Ava. And the look on his face was not the look of a stranger meeting someone new. It was recognition. The man stood in the doorway, rain dripping from the brim of his coat. For a moment, no one moved. Only the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall filled the silence. Eleanor's voice was the first to break through. "Come in," she said, though her tone carried none of the warmth the words suggested. The man stepped forward, his eyes locked on Ava. She shifted slightly in her chair, confused, instinctively touching the locket at her neck. Marcus stood. "Who are you?" The man's gaze didn't waver. "My name's Richard." He paused, his voice lower now. "And I knew your mother." Ava's heartbeat quickened. "You knew her?" Richard nodded slowly, glancing at Eleanor. "Knew her and her sister." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Say what you came here to say, Richard." He took a step closer to Ava. "That necklace you're wearing, it belonged to Clara." Ava's voice trembled. "Clara? My mom's name was Clara." Eleanor closed her eyes for a brief moment, the weight of the confirmation pressing down on her. Richard's expression softened, but his words cut through the room. "Your mother was Eleanor's sister." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Marcus looked between his mother and Ava, disbelief in his eyes. "Wait, are you saying?" Richard nodded. "Ava is your cousin." Narrator tone tightens, slow and deliberate. Eleanor had spent decades building a wall between herself and Clara, a wall made of old arguments, buried grief, and things left unsaid. She had told herself the past was over, that the people in it could not touch her life again. And yet here Ava sat, living proof that the past never truly stays buried. Ava's voice was barely above a whisper. Why didn't you ever reach out?" she asked Eleanor. Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Because your mother made choices that I couldn't forgive." Marcus stepped forward. "What could she possibly have done to make you pretend you didn't have a sister?" Eleanor's gaze shifted to the locket. "Ask her where she got that necklace." Ava looked down at it, fingers brushing the smooth gold. "It was in a box of her things. She gave it to me before she died." She never explained why it was so important. Richard exhaled, the sound heavy. "Because it wasn't just jewelry. That locket was the only proof of an inheritance, a fortune your mother walked away from to protect you. Ava blinked. Protect me from what? Eleanor's voice dropped. From him. Her eyes cut toward William. The father's expression didn't change, but his stillness was the kind that said he was no longer a bystander in this conversation. William didn't flinch at Eleanor's words. He simply set down his glass, leaned back in his chair, and studied the room like a man watching a game he had already won. Ava's brows furrowed. From you? Why would my mother need to protect me from you? Marcus turned sharply to his father. Yeah, what is she talking about? William's voice was calm, almost bored. Your Aunt Clara and I disagreed on certain matters. Financial matters. She thought the family fortune should be divided differently. I thought otherwise. Richard's jaw tightened. That's a polite way of saying you manipulated the will. Clara found out, and when she confronted you, she was cut off completely. Ava's hand tightened around her locket. You took everything from her. William shrugged. She had a choice. She could have stayed and accepted my terms. She chose to leave. Eleanor's voice was sharp now. She chose to escape. He wanted control over everything. The money, the property, even her daughter. You think I didn't see it? For a moment, the mask slipped. William's eyes darkened. She was reckless. That child would have grown up in chaos. I was willing to take her in, give her a proper life. She refused. And so Richard cut in. She disappeared. Changed addresses. Changed jobs. She kept Ava away from this house because she knew what it would cost. Ava's voice trembled, but it carried strength. And now I'm here, wearing the one thing you couldn't take from her. Silence. Eleanor looked at Ava, and in her eyes there was no more suspicion, only something softer. Regret. She stepped closer. Your mother and I, we fought. We said things we couldn't take back. But seeing you here, Ava, I see her in your eyes. I see the girl I used to run through the orchards with. And I'm sorry. Ava's throat tightened. For the first time since she'd walked into the Caldwell estate, she felt like she wasn't just a guest being examined. She was family. Marcus moved beside her, slipping his arm protectively around her. So what happens now? Eleanor's gaze shifted toward William. What happens now is that she's welcome in this house, whether you approve or not. William's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Not because he agreed, but because for the first time he'd been cornered in his own home. And so the night ended not with the clinking of wine glasses or the polite goodbyes of high society, but with something far rarer in the Caldwell estate. Truth. The necklace hadn't just been a piece of gold. It had been the last unbroken thread between two sisters, stretched thin over decades of silence, but never severed. For Ava, it was no longer just her mother's keepsake. It was proof that she belonged, not because of wealth or bloodlines, but because she carried her mother's courage in her heart. And for Eleanor, it was a reminder. That family, no matter how fractured, has a way of finding its way home. In the end, the necklace wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was the key to a family's buried truth, and the spark that brought a lost daughter back into the light.